Oh, damn it, Clarence.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to the vlog. I'm losing my voice, so I'll keep this short. Poker, money, gamble, vlog. If you enjoy it, like and subscribe. Let's get to it. In the first hand of the night, which is about 40 minutes into my session, there's a button straddle, we're in the cutoff, and we look down at 5-6 of spades. We see a call from the big blind before +1 bumps it up to $20. We then see a call from +2. It folds over to me, and I'm happy to call and play this hand in position. The big blind also calls as well, so we're off to a flop 4 ways. The flop is 3-7 jack rainbow, so we flopped a gut shot straight draw. It checks to +1 who puts out a c-bet, but it's only for $15. It's really small. +2 folds, and when it's on me, I'm happy to call and chase my straight. The big blind calls as well, so now we're 3 ways to the turn. The turn's kind of an interesting card. It's the jack of clubs, so it pairs the board. This time +1 checks it over to me. There's about $125 in the pot, and I've got about 160-ish behind, so I think I can either just kind of check and give up, or maybe I can put out a bet, and if I'm going to put out a bet, it needs to be a polarizing one. It's probably going to have to be a jam, so I end up jamming all in with 6 high. Both players end up making the fold, and we're able to win this one. We're in the small blind this time, and we look down at ace-5 of hearts. We see a raise in early position, but it's a small one. It's to $5. It folds around to the hijack, who then 3-bets to $20. Then we see a call from the cutoff. It folds over to me, and being in the small blind, I think I should probably raise or fold with this type of hand, but instead I like to just call. The big blind calls, as does the early position player, so we're 5 ways to a flop. The flop is 7-9-4 with 2 hearts, so we flopped a flush draw. Being first act, I start with a check, and it checks to the cutoff, who bets $36, kind of a small size. It folds over to me. I've got the nut flush draw, a backdoor straight draw, and I've got an overcard. I don't think flatting makes any sense here, as there are a ton of turn cards that I'm not going to like, so instead, I bump it up to $110. Folds all the way back around to the cutoff, who doesn't think too long, and he folds, and we use aggression to take another pot down. A little over an hour into our session, and we get a seat change to the optimal vlogging seat. In this hand, we're in the cutoff, and we look down at Queen 10 offsuit. We see 1 limp before the action gets to me, and I bump it up to $12. The big blind is the only caller, so we're off to a flop heads up. The flop is ace-9-6 with 2 clubs. My opponent checks it over to me, and on the surface, this really isn't a great flop. But I feel like there's a lot of good cards for me to continue on, including some bluffs. Like any 8, jack, queen, or club is either going to give me equity, or I represent that it can give me equity. So I fire a c-bet of $20. My opponent calls, so we're off to the turn. The turn is a 4 of clubs, so it's one of those cards I was talking about. Once again, my opponent checks, and I stick with the plan, and I fire a bet of $65. My opponent insta-folds, but this is a good example of playing poker outside of just the 2 cards in your hand. Four Rivers Josh was in the house. Last time we played together, he owed me at my own Meetup Game, so f*** that guy. Also ran into the publisher today, and it's always good to see vlog watchers, so if you ever see me out and about, please make sure you come up and say hello. There's a button straddle. We're in +2 when we look down at ace-deuce of hearts. It calls all the way around to me, so with the action on me, I'm going to put in the squeeze and I bump it up to $30. Everybody ends up folding, but we collect $20 without having to see a flop. We're in the cutoff this time, and we look down at King 9 of spades. The action folds all the way around to me, and with no one showing a real interest, I bump it up to $10. I'm immediately punished by the button, who 3-bets to $30. I call $20 more, we're heads up to a flop. The flop is King 9 deuce rainbow, so we flop top 2 pair. I start with a check, and my opponent continues for $30. I think there's merit to raising here to start piling in money, but I'm going to go ahead and just flat and keep a lot of his weaker hands in his bluffs in, so we're off to the turn. The turn is a 5 of hearts, so now it brings in a flush draw. I check again, and my opponent continues again for $30. So at this point, I put him on a really good hand, maybe ace-king or king-queen. I think he's strong enough to call a raise, so I decided to go ahead and check raise now to $90. My opponent enters the tank, and perhaps he's not as strong as I thought he was. I'm hoping he can maybe put me on some sort of combo draw, like a pair plus flush draw, or maybe just a weak king myself. He gives it a little bit more thought, but then he ends up folding. There was a monster 3-way all-in with Four Rivers Josh. On the flop, we see a bet. Then we saw Josh raise to $45. Then the guy to the left calls. It's back on the original bettor, who then jams for $196 total. Then we see a flat from Four Rivers Josh. Then we see the early position player behind him flat as well. Then Josh and the early position player just blind jammed the turn for $63 more. As you can see, it's top pair versus a straight draw versus two pair. Early position turns his straight and it ends up holding. So it was a big $800 hand between these guys. Sorry, Josh. There was another viewer at the table, a guy named Clarence. He was sitting across from me. He was a really nice guy, and he and I are actually going to mix it up these next couple hands. There's a button straddle. We're in the small blind, and we look down at pocket eights. With the action starting on me, I decided to go ahead and limp. It folds to the low jack, who then bumps it up to $20. He left himself about $60 behind. It folds over to Clarence, who then makes the call. It folds back to me, and I have the option to either call and see a flop, but there are going to be a lot of flops that I don't like. Perhaps if I come back over the top, I can actually just isolate the small stack player. I don't want to make it something like $80 and then get called, and then Clarence just has to call because he's priced in. So instead, I jam for about 200 effective. The short stack calls me a little quicker than I would have liked. It's on to Clarence, who should have a pretty clear fold here. He takes a good long look at his cards. Clarence seems torn. Like maybe he has tens or jacks, and maybe he's worried he's run into something like queens. Eventually, Clarence makes the call.
I am in.
Is hair any good? Punt! Punt alert! This seems pretty unnecessary. I mean, I guess there's a glimmer of hope that I'm ahead of the side pot. We're practically flipping, so let's see a flop. The flop is queen high, so right away we're in trouble. The turn is a six of clubs, and the short stack actually starts to walk away before turning his hand over. And the river's kind of a gross card, because somebody just binked a two outer. The short stack did, as he binked the 10 of clubs on the river, and we just punted off all of our profit from today for absolutely no reason. I mean, I guess my thought process was okay. Clarence and I were flipping. I kind of ran into it with the short stack. So long, profit. The very next hand, I'm straddling from the button, and I look down at Jack 10 offsuit. It folds to Clarence in middle position, who flats. There's a player I call coach in the hijack, and he calls. It folds over to me, and so frustrated with myself, I elect to just flat and play the hand in position. We're off three ways. The flop is 10-8-6 with two spades, so I flop top pair. It checks to coach in late position, who fires out a bet of $50, and I very quickly call, still steaming. And I think my plan is to jam any card that doesn't improve the board. Now, against this particular player and coach, probably not a great idea, but that's the plan as we head to the turn heads up. The turn is a four of clubs, so 5-7 completes, but overall I think it's a safe card. And coach slows down and he checks. So sticking with my weird steamed plan, I rip it and coach snaps me off.
You guys are just seeing an absolute meltdown.
125. Let's see how much more.
You guys ever seen something melt before?
This particular opponent is only calling me with a better hand, so it's back-to-back punts. And they're back-to-back unnecessary punts. What the hell am I even doing? I think it's time to go home. Until the river is the miracle jack, I roll it over and coach insta-mucks, and he looks really mad. So somehow I get most of the first punt back, and we live to fight another day. While I have the kicking unit on the field, we're in +1 and we look down at 6-7 offsuit. When it folds to me, I bump it up to $10. We see calls from the cutoff and the small blind, so we're three ways to a flop. The flop is 9-4-3 rainbow, so we flopped a gut shot straight draw. The small blind leads for $15, and with my gut shot, I'll call one time. The cutoff folds, so we're heads up to the turn. The turn is an 8 of diamonds. It seems like a really good card as now I'm open-ended. The small blind then slows down and checks. So now I feel like I'm up against something maybe like ace high or maybe a hand very similar to mine. And perhaps I can take over the hand with a bet. So I fire out a bet of $40. Action back on the small blind, who then jams for 104 total. So it's like $60 to win about 200. It feels like I'm getting about 3-1. So I think I have to make the call. My opponent rolls over 8-9 for two pair, and we need to get lucky here. The river is the ace of hearts. And once again, we give a bunch of money away. There's a button straddle. We're in under the gun, and we look down at ace jack of diamonds. It folds to me, and I put in a raise to $20. The cutoff and clearance on the button call, so we're 3 ways to the flop. The flop is ace queen 8 with 2 clubs, so I flop top pair. Being first to act, I start with a check. It checks to the button who fires for $20. The board's very connected, and I don't want to start bloating this pot up early, so I elect to just make the call. The cutoff folds, so we're heads up to the turn. The turn's a 2 of spades. Seems like a really good card, and I feel like I got kind of lucky not getting punished with this turn card. So I decided to go ahead and lead on this card, and I bet $70. My opponent calls, and so when he calls, I think the plan is to jam any safe river. The river is a 4 of hearts. That seems really safe for me. So I stick with the plan, and I jam all in. My opponent looks frustrated. He says he missed the flush, and he ends up folding, and we win a pot. We're in the big blind this time, and we look down to 6-9 of spades. We see 3 calls before the cutoff bumps it up to $10. 4 of us end up making the call, so we're headed 5 ways to a flop. The flop is queen 9-7 with 2 clubs, so I flop middle pair. It checks to Clarence in the cutoff, who fires a bet of $15 out. I have a piece here, so I'm fine with continuing. I make the call. +1 calls as well, so we're 3 ways to the turn. The turn is a 6 of clubs, so it gives me 2 pair, but it does bring in the obvious flush. I start with a check to see what happens, and it ends up checking around. The river is a 3 of hearts. Seems like a really safe card. While this board's dangerous, I think there's still value to get from a hand that contains a queen, and so I fire for $50. It folds to Clarence, who doesn't think too long and he calls. I show and he mucks, and we win another one. There was another vlog watcher that showed up, Joaquin. I hope I'm saying that right. He started watching the vlog earlier this year, and he and I are going to mix it up here. I'm straddling from the button when I look down at Jack 6 offsuit. I don't exactly know the pre-flop action, but what I do know is that we're headed 6 ways to a flop. The flop is King Jack 6 rainbow, so we flop 2 pair. It checks to under the gun, who fires for $10. It folds to me, and being a rainbow board, I'm happy to just flat here. Joaquin comes along as well, so we're 3 ways to the turn. The turn is a queen of diamonds, a really gross card, just really connecting this board. And then Joaquin just leads into us for $48, all in. So it folds to me, and nothing to do here but call, and I do. He shows King 4, and so we're in really good shape as we head to the river. The river is a 2 of spades, and we win again. We're in the big blind, and we look down at King Jack offsuit. My details are a little bit fuzzy here as I was talking to a high stakes player, but from what I remember, under the gun raised to $10, and then everybody called. So when the action got to me, I put in the squeeze to $50, and I got 2 callers, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is Jack 6 deuce, so we flop top pair on this board. I'm first to act, and I think there's a really good chance that I'm ahead here. And so I don't want to check and risk it checking through, and so I fire out a bet of $75. Early position folds, and it gets over to Clarence in the cutoff, who takes another long look at his cards, and he starts talking about how it might be time to go home. Now I know I'm best and probably up against like maybe a medium pocket pair or ace king suited. Clarence ends up making the jam for about 155 total, and I can't fold now, so I call. The turn is a 10 of diamonds, the river a 7 of spades. I roll it over, and I'm shown king queen, so I had him crushed when we got it in, and then he turned a huge chunk of equity, but we end up holding and scooping a nice pot, and now we have a really healthy looking chip stack in front of us. I gave a little bit back at the end of the night when I didn't realize there was a 4-liner to the straight on the board, and I bet right into the nuts. But truth is, I came to play to make a little bit of vacation money, and I've had it and then almost given it away twice, so I'm not going to do it a third time. I rack up after 4 hours, and I call it a night. We were into the game for 300, out of the game for 611, so a profit of about $77 an hour or 38 big blinds an hour. Thanks again for watching. If you enjoy, like and subscribe. We'll see you next time. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more poker content. And you can follow me on Instagram at 7cardflushpoker.